All right, everybody. We're going to be taking another look at a content creator that I have very mixed feelings on. On one hand, I really want to drop this content creator, but on the other, I have many nostalgic memories of watching his content. He's genuinely one of my favorite gaming content creators that I've gotten into in more recent years. Most gaming content creators I watch, I discovered long ago, and I'm mostly watching their old catalog of content since many of them quit YouTube. But Asmongold, the person we're about to talk about, is one of the few modern-day gaming content creators that, in the last few years, I found consistently returning to his videos and actually being entertained by. The problem is, Asmongold's kind of fallen off recently, both in the fact that he doesn't really do much of the content that I enjoyed so much from him in the first place anymore, and on top of that, he started heavily leaning in to a conservative audience and kind of like catering to an anti-woke audience, but he's also weirdly defensive of Hassan. Like, he and Hassan are friends and part of that clout streamer sphere on Twitch. Like, they're all like, it's very much a tight-knit streamer sphere of clout. So they defend each other, but they cater to like the opposites in terms of audiences. Like, Asmongold's audience hates Hassan, but he defends Hassan. Oh yeah, super best friends go hard. Exactly, Avis. It's a good example of some of the classic gaming content I used to watch back in the day. Super best friends, fantastic. I think they probably did the best Until Dawn playthrough on all of YouTube in terms of comedy, and the fact that they literally accidentally like perfect it. Like, they get everyone out alive on accident, I believe. Like, maybe one person gets killed. Yeah, I loved them. Anyway, Asmongold. His politics lately have been weird and a little bit... listen, I watch a lot of content that is not in line with my politics. I watch podcasts that are hosted by dudes that'll just, like, say the most horrific shit out of nowhere. But 90% of the time, they're just fine, and they're like some of the most entertaining podcasters ever. And it bothers me, for sure, especially when they're talking about a political topic and I know they're wrong and they're saying stupid shit, especially when they get, like, fed back positive reinforcement by an audience that's slowly starting to niche down. It definitely worries me, and it bothers me a little bit, but it doesn't destroy my ability to appreciate the content. In the case of Asmongold, though, all of his content is starting to become politically related, and where the politics are is super indistinguishable. On one hand, he's been shouting out a bunch of anti-woke content creators like Yellow Flash 1 and Rev Says Desu, the Lolicon YouTuber. And on the other hand, he oftentimes goes on rants about how he doesn't agree with policies or beliefs that Trump supporters or far-right people have. He genuinely is a fucking griller with absolutely no political literacy, which is why, when I heard about this video, I immediately wanted to cover it. I've actually put it off quite a bit and meant to cover it a lot sooner, but now I'm finally getting to it after much more important news took the priority. Asmongold took the political compass test. This is probably going to be the best way to gauge this guy's political views, and I'm less interested in his answers and more interested in his reasons for answering what he does, as well as, of course, how his chat, his fans, react to his answers, whether it be positively or negatively. Guarantee you, if he picks any progressive-leaning options, it'll be a negative response. All right, let's take a look at this. Asmongold took the political compass test.
A political compass test. So here we go. Before taking the test, please note this isn't a survey and these aren't questions, they're propositions. The purpose is to trigger reactions in the mind, measuring feelings and prejudices rather than detailed opinions on policy. Don't look at chat during it. I'm not going to... What's my opinion on this one, guys? Guys, I'm going to read chat. I'm just going to vote the way I fucking want, though. Okay, let's go ahead and let's do it. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I do strongly agree on this, but I want to go with agree instead of strongly agree for some reasons, because I think that usually this is an emotional argument, because transnational corporations often can serve humanity as well. In the same...
Okay, this is a good take. Asmongold is not stupid, but he is politically illiterate. But but the fact that he is a smart person means that if he actually knows what he's talking about, he oftentimes has genuinely good takes. The fact is that, yeah, oftentimes transnational corporations and capitalism as a whole can improve the quality of life for a lot of people. The fact is that we are existing under late stage capitalism, which means we're seeing a lot of the negative side effects of it. And that's sort of an inevitability of the economic system because there has to be a lower class. There always has to be people on top, people in the middle, and people at the very bottom. But that middle area has always been shrinking, right? The problem is the average person likely agrees with this perspective. The issue is most transnational corporations are not helping humanity in the long run. Like, let's be real. Like, a lot of transnational corporations are putting off insane amounts of carbon dioxide, producing, doing the most to harm the earth in regards to climate change. They are, in large part, involved in the buying out of politicians in order to allow for the reduction of regulations that allow them to destroy our planet and fuck people up, poisoning people, et cetera, et cetera. It really is kind of a middle ground thing. On one hand, none of these transnational corporations care about you, but at the same time, the existence of these corporations does have some lasting positive effects, but they don't really outweigh the negatives, in my opinion. Capitalism was an upgrade from mercantilism, after all.
Same way, it's like corporations say the government doesn't care about you, and then the government says corporations don't care about you. So, like, I don't necessarily think, and like these corporations are also comprised.
Okay, that's a very dumb take. The government says corporations don't care about you, and the corporations say the government doesn't care about you. Neither of these groups care about you, unless that's what he's arguing here. Neither of these groups care about you. However, the government has a necessary vested interest in keeping you safe and alive. There's a reason why it invests billions in a military that can protect and offend for you at the end of the day. The fact is that they rely heavily on the American people being prosperous. The government wants the American people to be prosperous, depending on who's running it. Also, the government is a really vague term in this context, because the government has different values depending on what administration is in power. I feel like we're doing way too much time spent on this first question, but, like, the idea that the government doesn't care about you, like, that could range between very true and extraordinarily false depending on what administration is currently in office. Hey, Delaney. Good to see you. It's been a long-ass time. Welcome. Man, we're seeing some OG long time ago Zan fans in chat today.
Prized of people. So I do think that this is a little bit of a... I don't know. Like, it's a little sus to me, but okay. I always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. No. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud about it. I disagree with that. I think it's totally fine to be proud about the country that you were born in. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that.
I partially agree. I would have gone with disagree. Or maybe just like, yeah, I would have gone with just a light disagree, I think, on this one. Because while I think it's okay to have pride in your country, the problem is that, well, obviously, this is meant to evoke a reaction. It's meant to see how much is Asmongold, in this case, prone to fall behind nationalism. He is very strongly in favor of national pride, which means depending on his other answers, he might get a outcome that gets him a little closer to nationalism than he expects. Obviously, being proud of your country doesn't make you a nationalist, but it's kind of trying to test the waters for that right now, it seems.
Like, the problem isn't pride, it's superiority. It's the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Everybody knows that. Don't they? I mean, fuck. Our race has...
Okay, no, good take. There's a difference between pride and feeling superiority. That's the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Good take from Asmon. He's not an idiot. He's got a lot of bad, disgusting habits, and he definitely has, like, a pretty messed up life in many ways, but, like, I don't think he's a bad person. I just think that, like, he's a gamer who has now found himself being sort of audience captured into moving away from gaming content because he's not a big fan of where the gaming industry is right now, and getting into political commentary content, and he's kind of digging himself into some weird holes on political issues because he's not super politically involved and he kind of likes to talk out of his ass a bit. But when he's not talking out of his ass, he's actually pretty well reasoned, and that's why I've always, enjoyed him. Hi, Zan. Never stopped watching, though. Been playing Silent Hill recently for the first time. Can really recommend the first one. It's so cool. The visuals are so charming. Y'all should play it. Maybe I'll stream the Silent Hill games one day. I've never played a single one, but they are very up my alley.
Any superior qualities compared with other races? I think that I know what they mean by races. Okay. No, I don't really think that's the case. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
There's plenty of people that are good at all kinds of different shit that are different races. And I think also, like, as soon as you start, like, getting into, like, statistics of, like, oh, well, like, this group of people is, like, taller or, like, has a higher IQ or anything like that, you dehumanize people. Because people are not a statistic.
Well, you can also draw it back to, like, very obvious reasons why. Like, for example, you know how, like, is it like Finnish people or Danish people? It's one of those countries up in like that Scandinavian region. They're very known for having ridiculously tall people, and you would think it's like some crazy genetic anomaly. The fact is, it's just that since the 1920s, it has been mandatory that there's like a certain amount of milk and dairy and other nutrients provided to babies and young children in school every single day. So like they've had some of the highest good nutrition for children for like 100 years plus, and it's led to like generationally taller people. And so, yeah, those countries where you tend to have way taller people, it's because those countries going back to like the beginning of the last century started strong government mandates on good nutritional free food for children, which led to generationally people getting taller. That has an effect. People having a better nutrition over the course of not that many generations leads to taller, healthier kids. It genuinely, unironically affects your genes. It's really bizarre, but it's true.
They're not a group necessarily. They're individuals. And so I don't like thinking like this. I think it's unhealthy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
No.
I mean, isn't there like a depends here?
Yeah, well, no. It's meant to be like agree or strongly agree. I think the agree is like depends, but kind of like usually, while disagree is depends, but not usually. And then strongly agree is always no, or or always disagree, and strongly agree is always agree. I think that like there's no middle ground because it doesn't want to say you're a centrist. It's not going to let you do that. So you have to pick a preference. It's going to force you to pick a preference, and the fact that you would pick one preference over the other is some indication of something.
Shouldn't there be like a depends? Like, I don't really know I don't know how I would answer this because, like, I think generally this is true, but it depends on how it's true.
No, it's not.
I think this, it depends on the enemy. It depends on the situation. It depends on the power.
The enemy of your enemy is not your friend. I've learned that. I would have maybe answered agree the same as him 4 years ago when I started doing like political stuff, but I very quickly learned that like the enemy of your enemy is not your friend. That is rarely the case.
The enemy versus the power of the enemy of your enemy.
If they were your friend, they'd be your friend.
Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. I don't know. I don't like this word justified. I will say disagree. I would say actually just normal disagree, not strongly disagree. And it depends on like what the law is. I don't know, because like martial law, yeah, because it's like who writes the law? Who decides whether something is justified? It's all subjective.
This is a sound thought process.
Like, for example, I bet the Japanese probably didn't like the fact that we dropped nuclear bombs on them, but we're justifying it. So a man wrote international law. God did not write this. This is not the Ten Commandments. So like, I don't know, man. Your opinion of justified? Yeah, it's my opinion of justified. It's a gray area?
That's
yeah,
I
don't know.
Take.
There's a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Strongly agree. Thank God. Okay, there's one that I can just click yes on and move on. Okay.
Yeah, I genuinely agree with that. The big thing is that the right embraced it really, really hardcore, while the left has kind of been like in a reaction to that, trying to embrace it. But the problem is that like it hasn't been successful. Like, look at the areas where the left has combined, like, entertainment and education or political messaging. And it's not very large-reaching and rarely destructive, but whenever the right blends entertainment and political messaging, it can lead to, like, I mean, look at Libs of TikTok. Her whole thing initially was that she's just a funny joke meme account. Obviously, that mask dropped a long time ago, but she's literally inspired bomb threats. John Oliver? Yeah, but John Oliver, Jon Stewart, all of those people, they were a reaction to right-wing demagogues such as, like, what was his name? That fucker on the radio. Um, Rush Limbaugh. Like, Rush Limbaugh and the other people that came before and at the same time as him. Rush Limbaugh was just the most recent of his kind, you know? There were many people that came before him that were just like him. Boomer conservatives loved listening to radio conservative talk hosts. The left only in the last like few decades started to like adopt that format for progressive messaging. And in the same way, we're seeing a similar thing happen online, where much like how John Oliver and Jon Stewart were a reaction to like right-wing Fox hosts and radio shows, content like mine or just lefty figures in general are a reaction to right-wingers making the new era of like Rush Limbaugh stuff, which is like online. You know, your Alex Jones, right? Your conservative grifters, those, you know, your Daily Wires, those types.
People are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. I definitely agree. Nationality, I think that
True.
this is... It's true and it's not true. Like, for example, I think that this is more true with, like, us and Canadians versus us and Saudi Arabians. Because, like, it's just a totally different culture, a totally different world. Like, yeah, we probably might have more in common with somebody in a different social class than somebody in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
but
this is a good take.
I think that a lot of poor people, you know, like, given, like, the same...
This is unironically like a Marxist-minded take that people are more divided by class than nationality. Like, this is him literally kind of like outing that he believes that fundamentally most of humanity should just get along on a global scale, and that for the most part it is the economic divides that like are probably the most fundamental things that sow differences between us, which is like an arguably like Marxist perspective, which is
Surprising.
I like to hear that. Like I said, I don't think Asmongold's far right. I just think he's politically illiterate and is easily audience captured.
Same general type of, you know, social economic status. Like, if you talk to a poor person in Poland or Russia or India, you will probably have more in common with them if you're poor than if you talk with a rich person of the same country. I think that is true. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I completely agree with this. I absolutely agree with it, because I don't think that you can control unemployment, because we're going towards a position of I
do not believe that is a good take. So a small amount of inflation is fine. So the big problem is that people who aren't really economically educated believe that inflation is a thing that goes away. They mix up two different things into being one thing that is non-existent in their heads. They mix up prices dropping post-recession and the inflation rate dropping, and they imagine some sort of magical deflation. That's not a thing that could ever happen in America, or will ever happen. And I don't think it has happened any time in American history as far as I'm aware. So the big issue is that unemployment in our current economy is probably the biggest problem. A small amount of inflation is fine. That is not necessarily reflective of what prices are going to be. Large amounts of inflation can lead to higher prices, but it's always going to be a thing. Controlling inflation is important, that's true, but unemployment is also quite important. Like, that's the difference between homeless people and people barely making it by. It's really hard to say. I feel like, It's hard to say. Deflation is bad in a failed economy, and under 4% inflation means your economy is growing and healthy. No, there is a small amount of inflation is fine, even healthy for an economy, from what I've read. But the issue is, it's hard to say, because it's controlling inflation, not lowering inflation. Controlling inflation in that wording makes me a little more sort of on the fence on this one. I genuinely think either option... I don't think either option necessarily like signifies that you don't care about any group or like like have bad takes. Like, this is just genuinely a pretty incoherent political, like, this or that, you know?
think that people will be able to expect to have a job in 30 years because so many things will be automated. So I don't think that controlling unemployment is a problem fundamentally. I think that the problem is not controlling unemployment, it's controlling people being able to survive. So yeah, because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect.
Okay, maybe Asmongold believes in like a UBI, like a universal basic income, and so being unemployed, I mean, he's very much like, as far as his lifestyle, he was unemployed for a long time and on unemployment. So maybe he's big time in favor of unemployment, UBI, and he doesn't really see unemployment as a problem. Rather, he thinks that we need to focus primarily on controlling the US dollar's inflation rate so that prices aren't too high, because he believes that with a UBI, it doesn't matter if you have a job or not. As long as the US dollar has value and buying power, then you can go to the store and buy what you need and you'll be fine. That's what I'm guessing his take is here, based on prior knowledge of his political opinions and his answer there.
The environment. It's not that
awful.
They cannot be trusted. It's that they can be trusted to violate the environment because they exist to make money, not to help the environment. And to the extent that they do help the environment, it serves a greater goal of making money. But don't forget which one, you know, the dog is the money, the tail is the environment, okay? The dog is wagging the tail and not the other way around. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. This is a quote from Karl Marx.
Let's see. Let's see, guys. Let's see how he reacts. The chat's got an interesting reaction already. Let's see. How does he feel about... what I bet he's going to say is, I actually think that Marx had some good ideas, but, like, look at literally any other country in the world that's implemented communism. It always fails. It always goes badly. So, like, I agree with that, like, principally, but it's just kind of a fantasy. That's what he's going to say. I guarantee you that's what he's going to say.
I don't know, because you use the word fundamentally. Because, like, whenever you say fundamentally, you're talking about idealistically. And so, like, and also I think many people have said that communism is a great system for robots. And so, like, whenever you talk about a fundamental thing, are you talking about an ideal? Are you talking about a functional? It's very hard to say. So, is a fundamentally good idea? I agree. I do agree. Because that's why we have scaling taxes. And I agree with scaling taxes. Okay. So, yeah, I agree with this. Now, I don't agree with it to the extent that Karl Marx does. But I do agree with it. It's not an...
I told you he would absolutely middle ground it. I told you he'd middle ground, but lean on agreeing on the Marx quote. Like, yeah, I generally agree with that, but, like, I think it's just a little bit... Yeah, I told you he would middle ground on that one. Because fundamentally, Marxism is just being pro-humanity. And, like, when it comes to some of Marx's most well-crafted quotes, it's pretty impossible to pick them apart and disagree. It's pretty hard. Like as far as, like, just fundamentally being a good person, it's difficult to disagree with a lot of his more well-crafted quotes.
I strongly agree, but it isn't agree. The freer the market, the freer the people. A free market can only exist whenever it's being controlled. Because the first thing that a person does whenever they have a truly free market is they control it. Why would you allow a free market to exist if you can price fix and scam people and then make the market not...
This is a good take. He's clearly gotten less libertarian.
...free and make more money? Like, we've had every single problem with this. Like, we've already gone through this like 10 times.
The logic is, much like we need the government to protect our rights so that we can be free, we need the market to be controlled by the government in some ways so the market can be free. While it sounds like there being rules means that it's not truly free, think about, like, 2B2T. Technically, 2B2T has rules. The oldest anarchy server in Minecraft, like, if you build a big lag machine that's destroying the server and making it unplayable, Housemaster will come and delete it. Technically, it's against the rules. You don't get banned, though, but people mostly look past that because if that wasn't done, then literally no one could play the server. There wouldn't be a server anymore. There would be no playing. There's this sort of recognition that it's okay to have enough... The rules that allow the server to fundamentally stay on and be connectable and playable are acceptable. But if it starts overreaching into areas where it's, like, unnecessary, that's where people have a problem. That is how our government and our government handles our freedoms, generally. At least we like it to be. And that is how the government should handle regulation of a market. That is, the best way for there to be a free market is for it to be a regulated market.
What?
In reality, the only free people, or the only people that should be focused on being freed in the market are the consumers, the vast majority of working class people that are consuming products. They shouldn't have to be worried about price fixing and worried about people, just agreeing, okay, you know what, we're just going to charge overprice it for everything. They don't have to worry about things being tariffed because the the resources that are made to are used to make them come from another country, and a bad leader is currently deciding to engage in a political stunt that's going to ruin U.S. domestic manufacturing. It's just, yeah, there's a lot to it. The freer the market does not mean the freer the people.
What is this? I do think that if you want to talk about an idealistic free market, I'm going to go with agree and not strongly agree. I am a massive free market advocate, but I think that the idea of a free market is only maintained by threat of force by a governmental entity or like some sort of like oversight. Free markets are a terrible term. I think that they are too, and they're often misused.
What he selected is a weird answer, but his reason for selecting it is fine, if that makes sense. Like, it's just weird that he selected agree, but then had the answer he has.
It's a sad reflection of our society. Something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. This is a literal like fucking r/atheism take. That's so ridiculous. The drinking water, like, yes, this is true in the case of Nestle and the way that they fuck up other countries. Sure, yeah, absolutely. But are we really talking about that, or are we talking about people who bottle water and then they have it at an airport? Like, for example, right? So if you have if you are providing a product. It's like that one fucking Australian guy that was talking about water being more and less expensive depending on where it is. Well, bringing it to that location is a value. And so that's why they're doing it. They're bringing it to that location to create value. So it's not really the drinking water that is the consumer product. It's the availability of drinking water that's the consumer product. So I disagree with this. I think it's stupid.
Okay. So he fundamentally disagrees with the idea that drinking water is a bottled, branded consumer product because the bottling, branding, and transporting gives it value, and that's what you're paying for. But the fact is, the question is truly asking, do you agree with the idea that you have to pay for water? Like water, something you need to survive. Do you agree with the fact that you have to buy it with money? You have to work to get water. Like, you can't get free water, which is what you need to survive. I guess he doesn't agree with socialism or communism, like, fundamentally, so maybe not. Maybe he doesn't believe that every human has a right to live.
Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I disagree with this. This is fucking stupid, too. Of course it should be. Now, and again, it's like everything about this is like, there's like 50 other buts.
I mean, he's definitely not in favor of, like, land being collectively owned, it seems. I mean, obviously, I think if you explained collective ownership of land to him, he would probably agree with it. But this is like a very American-brained thing. Like, you're never going to convince an American that owning land is bad. Like, owning land is the, like, peak of American, of the American dream. Yeah, you can see the chat's like commie stuff, lol.
And, like asterisks, etc. Terrible Asmongold takes? Yeah, no, of course you should be able to own land. Of course. Because if you can't own land, then the idea of people not owning something is fake. Everybody has owned everything for all of time. It's just the way that ownership is enforced.
Well, I think it's the way that ownership works as a system. So even Marx says that, like, you would still own the clothes on your back, the hammer you swing for your, like, job or whatever it is. Like, you would still own things. The bed you sleep on and the pillow you rest your head on, all those things. You still own them. They're still your possessions. There's a difference between possessing something and owning something. As far as, like, Marxist theory seems to lay it out, that there's a difference between something being your possession and being, like, owned by you. So in our modern day conception of ownership, you own something even after you die, to the point where you can inevitably or indefinitely, like, leave it to family members and friends and decide what will be done with that property, object, whatever it is, even after you die, right? That is kind of our modern perception of ownership. Well, the idea of personal property is that you would still, in the modern conception, own it as you do today, but it wouldn't mean that, like, oh, you bought this land, this means your family owns it forever. Many Americans might be opposed to that idea, but the idea of a lot of Marxists is that one family getting to own a plot of land forever, even after the person who bought it died, it isn't really a fair shake of things, right? Like, the land should be divvied up as it is, as it is needed, and as it is most necessary and efficiently used.
It's regrettable that so many personal
At least in
fortunes
the
are made by
Marxist
people who simply
sense.
manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. I completely disagree with this. I think this is a take from somebody who doesn't understand the input and the way that stocks work. Whenever you are investing in a company, you are empowering that company to make more money, and then you get more money back from that. So no, I think this is a ridiculous.
Is that what Wall Street Bets did when they did market manipulation for like a year? Is that what the private investors over at Wall Street Bets were doing? Is that what, like, on the other end of things, the hedge funds that Asmongold was cheering for the fall of during the Wall Street Bets thing? Is that what the hedge funds are doing? Are they helping our economy by short selling or buying out fucking like shorting stocks in order to try and like profit off of the fall of badly projected corporations? Is that like a good thing? Because like Asmongold was cheering on the fall of the index funds, and these are some of the biggest parts of the American stock market. So it's interesting how he's like, no, it's a dumb take, but when it was super popular to shit on index funds and talk about how these horrible, awful people are just manipulating the economy and fucking over the little man, and Wall Street Bets is owning them, and that was the popular take, and he was super audience captured on that take, that was what he believed back then. Asmongold's takes very much sway depending on what he's talking about and how emotional he is on a topic. If he's feeling emotionally annoyed by a conservative, like he's watching a Andrew Callahan video, like the rapist guy who somehow still, like, the left just kind of totally accepted back, he'll be watching like an Andrew Callahan video making fun of conservatives, and he'll be like, yeah, oh, such idiots, oh, they're so stupid, oh my god, they're so dumb, how can you be this dumb? But then if like a lefty woke whatever thing pisses him off, he'll go on a rant about how the woke are annoying. A lot of it is just, he is very emotional with his politics, and most people are. Asmongold truly is a perfect representation of the median voter.
This opinion. And you're also risking it as well.
He also doesn't vote, so...
You don't know if you don't pay real estate tax? Well, I'm just saying, like, with...
He's actually the perfect representation of the median non-voter. He doesn't vote.
With this, though. How is shorting ethical? Well, we're talking about manipulating money. There's a lot of different ways that you can manipulate money. Are we talking... And this is the problem, right? With a question like this. Are we talking about shorting stocks? Or are we talking about, you know, people that are literally doing, like, currency trading? Are we talking about people that are, you know, stock trading?
He's
Like,
actually...
it's very hard to say.
He's acknowledging the... Okay.
Why are you reacting to the statements as if you're debating whoever wrote them? Well, I'm verbalizing my internal thought process of how I'm going to answer a question.
Literally same.
Does that make sense?
Same though.
Yeah, I'm just talking about how I'm thinking about the question. I'm not debating it or anything like that. I'm just talking about it. Let's see here. Yeah, you know what? The shorting argument that somebody made in chat, I do agree with that. I think that's a good point, that there are examples of that not being true. So, like, I think that this is generally untrue, but there are examples of it being true. So, yeah.
Okay, literally the argument I made, someone in chat made, and he was like, okay, actually, you know what? I see where you're coming from there. Yeah, like, hedge funds shorting, like, stocks is actually pretty bad. Yeah, that's actually pretty fucked up. No, yeah, I think sometimes it can be true. And he changed his answer. That's, you know what? That's pleasantly surprising. I generally think a lot of Dunning-Kruger for Asmongold. I mean, people often think they understand the systems we live in perfectly without knowing much at all. Yeah, you can never be wrong in just believing constantly you don't know shit. I constantly tell myself, no matter what topic I'm discussing, and I'll even reiterate it publicly, guys, I don't know shit. Take what I say with a grain of salt, and always, like, fact check something before you repeat it. For God's sakes, like, even if you're really sure something I said is true, fact check it before you repeat it in a case where, like, being called out and it being wrong could be embarrassing or something. Like, I'm a human. I can make mistakes sometimes. I do my best to be as on top of things as possible, but, you know, I don't know everything, and I try to always remind myself not to fall into that Dunning-Kruger effect syndrome, you know, where I start to think I've figured it all out, because there is no such thing as that. You will never have figured it all out. Anyway, back to it. I feel like at this point, we're 30 minutes in, and I should probably skip to when he gets his result. I guess, like, the last few questions and then his result, and we'll see what he gets. Oh, I saw a sneak peek.
That there's way too much of it. There's too much of a fixation on it. It's unhealthy.
Ooh.
It's like whenever...
Ooh. Ooh, this is an interesting
There's
question.
7
Okay.
billion people, not a single one of them can. Get the fuck out of here. Obviously, being gay isn't the norm. Most people aren't gay. That doesn't mean nobody can be gay.
Okay, good take.
Come on. These days, openness about sex is... I feel like this question's aged very well with OnlyFans. Openness about sex has gone too far.
All
I
right,
actually agree.
Here it comes. You're about to be exposed to the overwhelmingly popular take among Gen Z men. Yes, Asmongold is not a Gen Z man. However, he is basically repeating the same sentiment word for word here, and it's probably going to be fairly well spoken. That a lot of the Gen Z men that are like being pulled into the Andrew Tate like incel stuff, like where they start from, which is this like, I feel like the OnlyFans stuff has gone too far kind of opinion. You're about to see like where the prude Gen Z takes are coming from and like why they believe this. So listen carefully.
With OnlyFans, openness about sex has gone too far. I actually agree with this. I do. I think that things are way too overly sexualized nowadays. I think that there's way too much of it. There's too much of a fixation on it. It's unhealthy. It's like whenever I see people that bring their kids to Hooters, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like that woman who had like her van with her OnlyFans, it's fucking disgusting. Absolutely not. And I'm a very sex positive guy. Like I absolutely am. But I think that it just being a dominant factor in basic culture that exists in a world where there are minors and children that are consuming it and seeing it, I think it's too much. And I think it's used, you know, like with movies, right? Like we saw the Henry Cavill thing. I totally fucking agree with them. Like people use sex scenes and sex content as a crutch for bad storytelling. And maybe not bad storytelling, but if you've played any gacha game, they certainly as fuck use it as a crutch for bad gameplay. Let's be real. Why Hooters?
This is a big part of another big part of why Gen Z is also very not big on sex scenes. I will say, watching through Game of Thrones with my friends on Discord, and it's just like we're on season 2 and we got to episode 3, and I feel like there's just like 5 sex scenes in that episode. There's a part where it literally smash cuts between 2 sex scenes, and like when it did that, my friend Ethan was like, no fucking way. Like, why are there so many sex scenes in media today? And why, like, I see Vosh get super defensive about it. I see a lot of lefties in general get super, like, defensive about it all across the board and get super pissy and, like, worried about lefties or young people, like Gen Z, hating sex scenes. And the fact is, a friend has a Stannis' moan soundboard based. That's awesome. I need to get that for my stream. Yeah, the Stannis moan. Anyway, like, I want to be able to watch Game of Thrones with my mom, you know? It's such an epic, amazing story, and my mom's only conception of Game of Thrones is the South Park parody trilogy they did, making fun of the nudity and sex scenes. But it's such an epic and amazingly well-written story that I would love to actually take her through it to experience, because it's genuinely, like, not life-changing, but I feel like it'll change a lot of your perspective on storytelling. But God, am I not going to sit next to my mom through, like, a single one of those scenes. Like, that's not what I want to do. The fact is that I like watching movies and TV shows with friends and family. I'm not some, like, neat degenerate who sits in a dark room watching everything alone with my dick in my hand. I want to sit on a couch with my friends and family and feel comfortable watching a show and have it not turn into softcore porn where it's like we're awkwardly all sitting there like, Yeah, you know what could actually be tied back to this? 50 Shades of Grey becoming mainstream. Yeah. It's like Asmon said there, I can tell when a show is using sex as a shallow crutch. They often do this, yes. Like a very good example of a movie that did this is the Wolverine movie where he goes to Japan. It's really not a good movie. Like a lot of the Fox X-Men movie are hit or miss, and that one is not. It's a miss. And they really just tried to shoehorn a romance subplot in, and, like, for the sake of, like, salvaging the fundamentally bad movie they had. Family night should never be a porn thing, or family porn night should never be a thing. Exactly, right? And I think a lot of Gen Z is just upset because, for us, I think many of you would agree, movies and TV shows are more of an event than they are entertainment. Like, Gen X millennials and older watch TV as sort of like a brain-numbing side thing to do. Well, I feel like for a lot of like Gen Z, getting together and watching a movie or binging a TV show with friends is like our way of hanging out with friends, right? And so we don't want that to be made awkward and weird with just unnecessary sex scenes that are thrown in for like, why are they there? It's hard not to feel like they're just meant to be there to please perverts. And I know in the case of Game of Thrones, it's often not the case, but at the same time, the sex scenes in the books were nothing like that. Like, the way George R. R. Martin wrote sex scenes was like, and they held each other and fell into a passionate love-making through the whole night. And it's like one sentence, and then you move on. It's like the next morning, it's talking about them, like what they were doing the next morning. Like, that's how George R. R. Martin would write sex scenes. And then the show comes out, and it's like back to back to back almost, you know, until like midway through the show where they kind of cut that down quite a bit. Yeah, they very clearly toned it up for the horny appeal. And when you feel that being the motivation, it makes it especially hard to sit through. It's not prudishness. It's wanting to be able to enjoy movies and TV shows without having to watch people fuck non-consensually. I really do feel like a lot of like progressive people unironically think it's prude to not consent to seeing people fuck. I'm not even joking. Look at Reddit. Look at lefty subreddits like Vosh's subreddit talking about this topic even. And they will genuinely call you a prude for not wanting to watch people fuck.
Because it's a sexual restaurant. It's a restaurant where the women are dressed, and it is a sexual avenue. What are we talking about? No, you bring your kids there. You're wrong. No, you should not bring your kids there. If your kid's 17...
Yeah, I disagree with Vosh.
I'm not, we're going to split hairs here, but I'm talking about bringing a 9-year-old there. Absolutely not. Hooters is tame today? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it is.
Now let's see where you stand. All right, you guys ready?
It's still pretty weird.
Where am I?
Scroll down.
Okay.
Hey.
There it is. Imagine thinking boobs equals porn. Boobs are absolutely sexualized. The name is literally... The store is literally named after a slang word for boobs. They are absolutely fucking sexual in our society, and you are...
I respect the fuck out of him going after Hooters as the example of sexualization in our society. It shows that he's got at least a consistency there about the exposure of kids to sexual stuff, you know? Like, I bet, like, he treats the drag queen stuff the same way. And I feel like you got to keep in mind that a fair amount of people aren't hypocritical about this topic. They think both things are bad. Like, kids being exposed to drag queens and kids going to, like, a Hooters or whatever. They see both things as bad. So you can't argue, oh, you're a hypocrite with those people. You have to argue why one thing is different from the other. Why it's not, like, sexualizing to take kids to like a drag queen story hour, but it is to take them to a Hooters, and they're not comparable.
Are not going to hoodwink me into thinking that they're not. If they weren't sexual, the restaurant wouldn't be called that name. Some people really need therapy. Do you agree with the outcome?
I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that.
How do you not expect that? Well, it's just like a lot of the questions for like the right-wing ones are like, do you hate gay people? Is your race better than everybody else's race? Like, these are like kind of, these are pretty intense. Like, there's a lot of other conservative values that aren't necessarily hating gay people and thinking that like certain races are bad, right? Like, we're...
What can I say, dude? That's literally the overwhelming, like world view of politics. Like, you answered a test that tries to pin you down where you are. If you are not racist, then this is where you fall politically. Like, there's this, like, perception right now that, like, yeah, not all conservatives hate gay people, not all conservatives are racist, but, like, if you're not that far into the right, then you're probably not really that much right-wing. Like, people think they're a conservative and say, oh, but I don't hate gay people. I don't hate gay people. That means conservatives don't hate gay people. And it's like, well, look at the evidence here. It suggests that you're actually pretty into the left, into the libertarian left category. I'm around here when I took the test, I believe. I think I was around here. So, like, me and Asmongold are not that far off. I wonder where I'd be if I took it today. But last time I took it, I was, like, somewhere in this area. Like, quite a bit closer to the bottom left corner, but yeah. I genuinely think Asmongold's not like a far-right person or anything. I think it's important to look at this and see how people with fundamentally good morals can be dragged into, like, really disturbing political trends just because they get into audience capture or they jump onto a bandwagon. I was roughly where Asmongold's political views were before I fell down the alt-right rabbit hole. The whole point of it is that it's radicalizing people and pulling in people who fundamentally don't believe those ideas already. And this is a perfect example of somebody who's fallen for that stuff but fundamentally doesn't agree with the end goal of those right-wing values.